All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 236 for the first week of April. Whew, we made it through. We are into the next quarter. We got a bunch of releases at the end of March in order to take care of most game companies' fiscal years, which means as we get into April, things start to slow down a little bit, but not here on the E2KG show. We've got plenty of games to talk about. There have been some new releases. We've got some cleanup to do from some other games that we've been playing. And joining me to talk about it tonight is Game Logic. Game Logic, how are you, sir?
Hello. I'm as good as could be expected.
Bringing the energy once again. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm going to keep you on the mic because somebody that does have some energy in her voiceover work is Ashley Birch with Tiny Tina. And so while my sister-in-law and I have been chipping our way through on a weekly basis of Borderlands 3 and all of its expanded content, we have not had a chance to play Wonderland yet. So you dove into Tiny Tina's Wonderland. How's your experience been so far, Game Logic? And first off, I know you played Borderlands 3. I don't know that you finished it. Did you bounce off of it? And if so, what gravitated you toward Tiny Tina? And are you finding any differences, or is it hitting you in a different way than your Borderlands 3 experience did?
Yeah, so I did play Borderlands 3. I didn't necessarily, I didn't bounce off of it. I just got overcome by there being other things to play and other activities that I was in. So, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, I'm not familiar with, like, the Tiny Tina, the mythos or whatever, so it was kind of a new thing to me. There wasn't anything in particular about the title. It was just a shooter-ish kind of thing that was out on the market at the time, and I've been trying to get around and play as many of the new games, as I can this year, because that's not necessarily, typically my focus. So the interesting thing tonight is, unfortunately, tonight is going to be less about content, and it's going to be a lot about my week of troubleshooting. So,
your PC? I mean, is it...
Yep. So,
hardware related or driver related? What are you running into?
It's probably a little bit of both. So I initially tried to play this on one of my boxes that runs an AMD Radeon RX 5700 XT. Specifically, the cards I use are by XFX. They're the triple dissipation cards, so they're these big Mongo honking cards. I tried running Tiny Tina's Wonderland, which has a reputation for kind of monkeying with people's performance envelope. But I tried to run this in 1440p with HDR on. And what I got was some really choppy, stuttery frame rates, a lot of wild variance in frame rates. And when I would, and so at 1440p with HDR on, I was getting like barely 60 frames per second and often dipping down to like 42. When I would go to 1080p, I would get back to like 100 and 142 frames. So there was a path to getting decent performance. Unfortunately, that path involved me cranking everything down to 1080p. I was able to run with DirectX 12 and HDR on. The real big key thing was I was forced to use Radeon Super Resolution, which has been talked about for a while, but only got implemented in this version of drivers. And so Radeon Super Resolution is a technique that you take, and I mean, even as I was reading about this, I was like, why would you ever do this? Well, now I understand why, but it's a technique where if you have the monitor set at a certain resolution, you bring the game up and tuck the game resolution to a setting below what the main monitor is, and then from there, the Radeon card will upscale the picture to the actual resolution of the monitor. Now, again, when I was looking at this, I was like, the monitor's at 1440p. Why would I dump the game down to 1080p and then ask you to upscale it back to 1440p? Why would I not just run the game in 1440p? Well, it's to handle instances where people are running cards where they can't run at 1440p. So it's been a weird thing, and then I was like, oh, I guess this is why. So, but along the way, I was cranky about how much I had paid for that card and the fact that I was not able to run at 1440p on a 27-inch monitor with HDR on, when I have been able to do so on that box before. I probably should have started the story with the fact that this whole story starts with the fact that like I said, that technique had only been enabled in this most recent set of drivers. I had just loaded that set of drivers, so the Radeon Adrenaline, I think they're the 22.3.1 drivers, which came out kind of near the middle of March. But because I haven't been over on that system, I had not loaded. The other thing that happened was there was a Windows update. So what I've done is I've spent the week going around to every workstation, two other of which run Radeon cards, one of which runs the exact same card, and basically run a battery of tests against Destiny 2, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, and Tunic. And I haven't seen that problem anywhere else. The only place I see it is over on that machine. So what I think that there is something buggy in these drivers, maybe that causes a specific bad interaction with the motherboard that I'm writing on that with that chipset, which I think I gotta look it up. I think that box is running a B550 chipset.
Are you getting that same performance across your other games that you tested as well? I mean, did Destiny 2 have any problems with that, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, so that box has been having problems with every game that I've run. It runs Tunic at 70 frames per second, and I'm like, Tunic is not a game that should challenge me to the point where it only runs at 70 frames per second. So I think, like I said, there's something bugged in the drivers when they're running on that specific AMD chipset on the motherboard. I'm not the only person that's experienced this problem. There are multiple Reddit threads talking about people who have been having lots of problems with these. Lots of people have rolled drivers back. In some cases, I've actually seen that people have rolled drivers back, still experience the problem, and they were just driven to dump and reinstall the entire OS and rebuild the box. And when I say rebuild, I'm talking about the software layer, but because they just couldn't get rid of kind of whatever jank got injected by those drivers. And I'm like, I am not doing that. So what I have done.
Oh, it keeps us in suspense. He has gone over to NVIDIA and GeForce rather than ADM.
Right, AMD. Prices finally came down, and I was able to grab an RTX 3060 card from Zotac. I've got to do some research because because the cards have been so sparse, I just really didn't really pay much attention to tons of the specs. Most of my effort this year has been driven to the fact that I had just had to do some pretty significant evolutionary changes, like lift to go to bigger power supplies, because none of these boxes could run the next generation GPUs because they didn't have enough wattage. But most of the cards have 8 gigabytes of GDDR6. For some reason, this one has 12. I need to see if that's an add-in that Zotac has made to this AIB. I suspect that it is. I also have a 3060 Ti on the way, which is an 8 gigabyte card, because I'm just going to swap the 5700 XTs out entirely, because the problem is that AMD has had a history of a bad reputation with regards to drivers, and part of this tour of duty in bringing these 5700 XTs into the shop is that I wanted to either prove or dispel that rumor, right? I've always believed that rumor. That's why I've been on nothing but NVIDIA cards for, great Scott, like almost 16 years.
That's pretty significant. Yeah, that's an investment.
Right. So, they've been great for the last year. I've actually been really impressed by the 5700 XTs. They are... I'm still not ready to pull my entire recommendation. I've always said, look, if you're punching at a certain price point for a GPU, it behooves you to take a look at the nearest AMD, because it might be that card is a few $100s less and gives you like within 10% of the performance of the NVIDIA card that you're trying to get. But you know, like I said, I'm in a weird valley where I want to de-risk as much as possible. So, you know, card prices have come down, so I was able to snag a 3060 and a 3060 Ti. So we're going to throw those into the box and see how they do.
So what are you going to do with your other cards that you had issues with?
What I'm slated to do right now. So first of all, I have tested that other 5700 XT, which is running in an Alder Lake box with an Intel CPU, and have experienced not one iota whatsoever of that problem. You know, on that box where I've been having problems.
It's a different CPU running the same.
It's a different
CPU.
Yeah. And I believe the problem's really endemic because I don't believe that any interaction with the CPU would cause any problems, but with the motherboard chipset, that could be a problem because that's where all the, you know, graphics information is coming across the bus to get to the CPU. So that's how I've been troubleshooting. Tiny Tina's. I'm sorry. So
no, wait. Yeah, what are you gonna? Are you scrapping the cards? You
no.
Can't really take them back. The aftermarket for them?
No. So I had on my slate that I was gonna build a Linux gaming box going into the summer since I'm only gaming on PC, and since I'm, you know, on standby in anticipation of being able to snag a Steam Deck.
That's what I was just gonna say. If you're building a Linux box, you're just prepping yourself for some Steam Deck.
Right. Yeah, I still struggle to say because I use multiple instances of Elgato's Stream Deck, and I still struggle to not say Stream Deck, but to say Steam Deck. But yeah, I was already planning on building a box. Now, what I may do is I'm going to check into if it's even possible and if it's even supported to run Crossfire on Linux, and I may just build a Crossfire box because I mean these AMD cards. I mean the one hit that they do have, even if as good as they have been for the past year gaming wise, is they are not the best streaming cards. And so the way I've just been evolving tech in the studio is I've been, you know, when I get a new GPU, new pair of GPUs, I push the next pair down. And eventually they wind up in a dedicated streaming rig. But the problem is I'm not going to put AMD cards in a dedicated streaming rig. I pretty much always need to keep those as NVIDIA cards. So Tiny Tina's Wonderland, despite the fact that I've spent a lot of time troubleshooting and whatnot, it's actually a super interesting game. To me, it is a game that is a little bit kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, just in terms of I feel like it punches above its weight. You know, both of those games were kind of, you know, 80 Metacritic score games. That's kind of where I think they are in terms of budget and production fidelity. But you know, right now, the little bit of Tiny Tina's that I've played, I find it far more interesting than Borderlands 3, at least at the opening and the outset. So we're going to see just kind of how it scales, right? Just in terms of overall performance as you get deeper into the game, but also in terms of how the narrative unfolds. What I do like about it is, for the first, and I don't know if this this says something. Because I'm sure it's deliberately intentional in terms of its design, but there's something like 36 equipment slots, right? Which is just a ridiculous number. Like, I've already hit the point. I'm not even 2 hours into the game, and I've just already hit the point where I'm like, I'm not bothering picking up like every single little thing. Like, I'm quickly triaging and going, my shield's better than that. I have weapons better than that. Right? So I'm already just going through and kind of leaving things around. And I saw this note on the internet about, you know, Gearbox was kind of trolling Borderlands players with all the loot, and so that may be what I'm experiencing. But what I have seen and what I do love right now is that there's just an incredibly greater variance of attack types. Like the two submachine guns that I have now hit people and freeze them, and so with certain enemies, that means some will get entirely frozen. With certain other enemies, they will just get slowed down. In the big boss battle that I just had, because I just had the first big boss battle, that guy gets slowed down, but when he hits you, it still like knocks off like 3/4 of your health. There is still, I can't remember, what is the thing called when you get knocked, and if you shoot somebody, like your second chance.
Second chance or second life,
Right.
yeah.
So there's still that. Fortunately, in this first boss battle, one of my pet peeves with that is when they do that, but they throw you into a battle where there's not enough kind of scrubs and peons, running around that you
Sure.
can take down.
You're stuck and you can't. There's nothing to kind of
Right.
low enemies. Yep.
Right. And I mean, you and I have both been in those situations where, like, you get knocked to second chance, like, just as you slide behind, like, an obstruction, and, like, no one ever comes around the corner, and you just bleed out. So there are those things in there. But so far, it's really interesting. The other thing that I find that's interesting in terms of level design is it seems like, just kind of like we've been talking about since kind of Halo 5, this is another game that appears to be taking a little more advantage of verticality. And so there's much more conscious and aware and awareness and intentionality.
Intentionality.
Yeah.
Yep.
Behind, where they kind of deliberately force you to traverse right in the vertical to get up to higher levels and things like that. So, and the combat, I also like. This is, I'm not sure if you've seen it or if you've had a chance to play it, but this is a game that, that it has melee in it and it has melee weapons, and you actually have a dedicated melee weapon slot. So, when you
And does that double as your magic then as well? Or is that a separate slot?
That's a separate slot. You have, I believe you have 2 quick slots for magic. I don't know because I just had my first spell. I think I just picked up my second one though, but I haven't had a chance to try and configure it. But I think the way I have it, it's the magic is configured to your Q button. So I don't think it definitely doesn't take up that slot. You're definitely able to do magic and still swing your melee. And I have magic configured to the Q key, but I have melee as like my mouse 4 button. So they are mutually exclusive, or they're not mutually.
Yeah, they're
exclusive.
distinct attacks.
Right.
Yep.
And when you swing your melee weapon, so when you hit melee, it automatically shifts from your ranged weapon to melee. So you don't have to fiddle around with like trying to switch to your melee weapon or like.
That's nice. You're not kind of cycling through to get to the
Right. Or like in Fortnite where you switch to your melee thing and then you go into a panic when somebody starts shooting at you, and like I've been on that thing and on my skies and then been shot at, and then in my panic the scroll wheel has just rolled me right back to some useless weapon or something like that. So none of those problems to date. Graphic wise, I want to say it's pretty good. Again, I've got to get past the troubleshooting, but on other systems I've tested it on, I am able to run it at 1080p, 1440p, with HDR on. It has its own in-game frame counter, so you don't have to kind of bring your own if you're wanting to check your performance.
That's nice. Good. Well, I'm glad you had a chance to play it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I find that the smaller content, the smaller stories in Borderlands have always been more satisfying. That in some ways, especially Borderlands 3, by the nature of it trying to be as big of a game as it is, it struggled to hold the narrative all together, where the DLC for Borderlands 3 was a lot more. I found it more enjoyable because it was a tighter story. So the fact that this seems to be, from looking online, a 14, 15 hour type of game for the main story, it bodes well in terms of being able to complete a satisfying narrative by having it be, not having it to need to be this epic scrolling adventure. So I'll be curious to see as you continue to play. One more question. What class did you end up choosing? And whether or not you remember the goofy Borderlands-esque name for it, or if there was, why you chose which class.
Yeah, I just threw all the names into the randomizer, right, and picked, off a random number. The class that I am, quite honestly, I started it at like 2:00 in the morning, after a night of troubleshooting. So I don't remember. What I do remember is I want to say There are kind of in the same way that there is in Elden Ring. There's more classes, I think, in this than you would normally be accustomed to. Like we've been so trained with like Destiny's 3 classes, and then Diablo 2s and Diablo 3s. What do they have? Like 5 classes at the 3 to 5, 4 or 5 classes at the outset, and then they add on some others. But this one kind of comes out of the box with I want to say like 8 or 9 different classes. So I honestly can't remember the names of them. I know that I've been referring to myself as a Fatebringer, but I don't know if that's like a generic label you're referred to in the game or if that's an actual class. So I will look that up while we're drawing about other stuff.
Sounds good. Well, I'm going to move on to other stuff then. And I had a chance this week to pick up Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga. So I find the humor in the Lego Star Wars games or in the Lego games enjoyable. I find or have found the gameplay in the previous Lego games eventually kind of boring. Like, I appreciate it for a good half hour, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is what this is. So, but looking at the previews, starting to read some reviews around the Skywalker Saga, that there is a lot more there than the gameplay is different than simply what it was in the original or in the standard kind of Lego mindset, even in the DC or the Marvel aspects here. So what it does is for lightsaber types of characters, you end up actually with a little bit of a combo system. You know, multiple attacks can juggle and kind of give you additional rewards there. For ranged characters with weapons, it ends up being like a Lego third-person action game where you've got a, left trigger pulls in a reticle, right trigger fires. You actually can do a little bit of cover. Headshots make a difference. So I've had a chance to play both the couple opening missions on episode 1 and also in episode 4. One of the things that it does is that even though it gives you all 9 episodes, only 3 are unlocked at the beginning. That only the first episode in each of the 3 trilogies is unlocked. And in order to make your way through, like if you really want to get to Exegol on Rise or whatever the final Star Wars is, I mean, why? But, you'd have to make your way through Last Jedi as well. I mean, so that if you really want to get to Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi, you got to make your way through A New Hope and Empire as well. So I haven't seen, this seems consistent from what I've been reading online. I haven't seen any type of cheat code or unlock that does that. There are a number of cheat codes out there that open up additional characters. There's something like 350 characters that you can collect or unlock as you move through the story. I find it's been kind of fun. It's been just lighthearted, and it is much bigger. It almost feels like a big open world Lego game. It feels like I had the sense of playing, what was that? Lego City Undercover, which was the kind of open world Lego game back on the Wii U and eventually ported for all kinds of other things because it was on the Wii U. So, but it does. It has that, like, I'm roaming around a Gungan center and all the different kind of pods, and there's extra little spots to unlock the Kyber crystals, which is kind of the big currency of skills. You have a skill tree. Your skill tree is both kind of universal in terms of moving faster, building faster, more health, but then there are also classes within it which all have their own skill trees in terms of Jedi, Sith, villains, heroes, pilots, droids, all have some different features there. So there's a lot more depth here than there has been in other Lego games. It's also something where it's a nice kind of palate cleanser type of game, right? It's not really serious. It's kind of fun just to roam around in a Star Wars world and catch some of the jokes that they make and the plays on traditional Star Wars tropes and situations. The humor is definitely there. So I'm enjoying it. I initially was going to pick it up on PlayStation 5 because I was anticipating that there would be some type of dual sense implementation, and that it could be kind of fun to have that. There's nothing besides vibration. There's no differentiation in terms of the dual sense between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. So I just grabbed it on Xbox because there were some additional bonuses in the Xbox rewards for it as well. And it looks great. Looks really pretty. I mean, on HDR, it's got nice, it's the small things, right? Like the fact that as you wander around, you can make out where the lines in some of the builds are in terms of where the bricks have come together, things that weren't possible in, the last time that there was a Star Wars Lego game, it was Star Wars Lego Star Wars 3, which was the Clone Wars one, which was early in the Wii U, PlayStation 3, kind of early 2010s. So it's been a while graphically.
So the second one, right? The prequels, the second one was the Clone Wars, right? And then the third one was Revenge of the Sith.
No, for the Lego Star Wars games.
Oh, sorry, no. I thought you were talking about the movies.
No. Yeah, in the Lego Star Wars games, yes. So yeah, because the Lego Star Wars games, they started with the prequels, then they went to the original trilogy, and then they did a Clone Wars specific one, and then they've jumped off and done all kinds of other Marvel and DC and everything else at every other property at under the sun at this point. So yeah, it has multiplayer, local couch co-op. It seems to, looking on, I haven't got far enough into it yet. One of the downsides in the couch co-op piece is in some of the boss battles, it kind of focuses, it makes them a little more cinematic, which is different in terms of what Lego boss battles have been before. But it also, if you're playing with couch co-op, it really only puts one person in that mold, and the other person is a different character who's kind of off doing a side objective type of thing. So yeah, Lego Star Wars. It's more Lego Star Wars, but for another generation, and it feels like a modern game versus just kind of a rehash of what their mold has been for the last 15 years. So that's a refresh. That's the part that feels kind of nice in here. Speaking of something that is pretty fresh, is Tunic. While it has some aesthetics in terms of older games, it definitely is doing some new things with perspective, with puzzles. So you've been playing on PC, as you talked about before. How far are you in it? How's your experience been? I've played a little bit of it. I love the design. I am struggling to get kind of into the game itself.
Are you struggling because of the presentation, or?
Struggling because I find myself wanting to wander way more than I should because I'm coming into bosses that I'm not prepared for. And so I need to kind of figure out where to go back to get the right equipment. And, I have a sword. I've gone through that, but I've also found myself kind of exploring further. So how far are you in it, and how's your experience been?
I feel like I'm only about an hour into it. Like I said, it's superseded by requirements to troubleshoot. It is a game that has kind of a clunky modality, as you're playing most of the game. But as you start to face enemies, the experience becomes more worthwhile. So yeah, I'm just at the initial vestiges of it. Like I said, it was suffering from performance 2 on that rig, but everything was. On other rigs that I play it on, actually, it performs the way that I think that it would, which is that it's capable of hitting more frames than the combination of a given GPU plus monitor would ever really generate. And so, as I've taken it to 2 other systems and just tried them out, it's kind of like that. So yeah, the game should, kind of fulfill the role it should be playing, like within your own kind of gaming menagerie, which is, it's something that you can play to kind of take your mind off of Elden Ring for a little while. Something that, again, is, may not be necessarily casual, but I like this other term that a guy coined, which is like it's a cozy game. So you can just kind of relax while you're playing it, but it's also not easy. So
I was gonna say, like, it is kind of aesthetically relaxing, but I find myself, because of the puzzles in it and because of the way that they start to dole out language, that they dole out the guidebook pieces, like, there's enough there that keeps you wanting to come back, but every time that you get another piece of something, it makes me want to go back to places I've been and try, apply those new skills. And listening to people online talk about it, I haven't necessarily made my way through all kinds of spoilers about it, but there does seem to be this Fez type of layer to it in terms of puzzles and perspectives and language and other things.
Right. Which platform have you been playing it on again? I'm sorry.
On Xbox.
On Xbox. So one of the changes I know that I need to make is I have been playing with mouse and keyboard because, again, I've been going through this testing. I do need to swap out for a controller and see kind of how I like the feel of that. Because, I mean, and this might be some of the reason why it's got, like, not great, PC scores from outlets, PC Gamer and whatnot, that seem like I think they've been reviewed it. But, like, it's not really a great control scheme on PC, and I don't think that you can change any of it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's designed for controllers.
Yeah. So, and then even like your keyboard mapping, like I said, I need to go back and look, but I don't think you can change any of that. So, like I said, I need to try it out with a controller, and I believe that at that point it'll play better. Just kind of like, Ori is a game that you could play with mouse and keyboard too, but I'm like, why would you ever play Ori, right? Even if you're on PC, why would you ever play that with mouse and keyboard? And I'm, a ride or die mouse and keyboard person. So, but yeah, it's enjoyable. Like you said, it's visually appealing. So.
Good. I'll be curious as you get a chance to play more of it and how you find some of the puzzles, some of the structure of that game. So hopefully when Tao is back as well, he's had a chance to play a little bit of Tunic, because it definitely is making some waves. You got a news story here about Tunic in terms of its language, that somebody has translated the language. Have you had a chance to look at that news story a little bit more?
Yes, I have, but I will read it. So I'll just do at least some part of it. This news article up on, I don't even know how nme.com. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. But a Tunic player has translated the in-game language. The game has only been out a few weeks. Within a month of being released, indie action tutor Tunic has already had its in-game language translated by a player who says it adds nice lore and flavor. Posted on Reddit, user Aposteo hasn't actually finished the game and is only a few hours into it, but he has translated the world's fictional language for all to read. You can see how some of the words appear to work, as well as the structure of the language. So I'm not going to get into all of that entirely. I'm the type of person where I don't ever like I don't know, listen to that. It's not quite the way that I want to term it. I'm not the type of person who's going to go out of their way, right, to experience.
Does this seem to be verified? I mean, is this? I could see where it's possible, and looking at the language and hearing other people talk about the game, there is that question of if the language, the characters in there are consistent enough to mean something and translate it. So it fits the pattern of the design of this game.
Right.
But it also seems like something that could be claimed by a lot of people if they wanted to put a post together.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't say that the developers have confirmed whether or not what he believes he's reading or seeing is actually what they intended or what it is. But this is another game. This is another kind of thing where and I love it. That where players are given provenance. Like I don't know. I don't know if it's as important whether or not that he's right as it is that he builds a context which may very well be the model, the only model that the community has, and that will have its own kind of trajectory, right?
That's
It
a
goes
really
around
good
those
point, right?
conversations.
This is that type of game that creates that environment. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to move on to another new release, which is MLB The Show 22. Had a chance to play that actually only for the last 2 days on Xbox. I'm playing on the Series X. It's iterative, right? I played the beta or whatever they did when they had their kind of server test back a couple months ago. Played it both on Switch and on Xbox, and picking it up or playing it on Xbox now with Game Pass. I am from anybody that's listened to the show before. I enjoy MLB The Show. I have enjoyed playing it since 17. Actually, in the weeks leading up to the release here, I went back and played MLB The Show 17 and MLB The Show 20, in part because they both are the kind of final iteration of their design elements within Road to the Show, where MLB 17 is the last time that you have kind of free points to assign to any skills, very much a la, NBA 2K. And then starting in 18, 19, and into 20 is when you have kind of the archetypes in terms of how you're starting. But then you have the progression models of you slowly progress as you are performing those skills, and you perform well, they go up. You perform poorly, they go down. You don't necessarily get the same freedom. And then in 21, they started the loadouts for both your Diamond Dynasty and your Road to the Show player, where you've got not only kind of the archetypes, but then also kind of a loadout of sub skill sets, whether that's increase in for a pitcher, speed, control, or fielding, batting, those types of pieces as well. That continues, that loadout type continues in MLB The Show 22. They've now separated back that the progression is not tied between Diamond Dynasty, the kind of card collecting mode, and Road to the Show, that they had tied those together so that you could play your Road to the Show character in Diamond Dynasty. And last year, Diamond Dynasty became the place where it was the most effective to level up your character and the loadout, because of the kind of increased percentages that playing in Diamond Dynasty gave you. They've separated that back out here. I don't know that there's I mean, it's an iterative sports title. I don't know that there's a huge amount of changes. Last year, there was a big change because it was on Xbox. This year, it's the first year that it's on Switch. Looking at some graphical comparisons online, it's running 720p, a little bit less when you get into handheld. It's actually hit somewhere between up to 50 frames per second sometimes on Switch, which is, but then it dips significantly in other places. I think on Xbox, it looks beautiful. I'm really enjoying it. I have a chance to play some Road to the Show, but also some March to October. So March to October is where you jump in, you pick a team and kind of jump into different situations. You start the season off, but rather than, you're playing key moments or key games, or you're jumping in the sixth inning of a game or the third inning after a big rally from the other team. So it kind of puts you in some dynamic situations. I didn't get a chance to play a whole lot of that last season, so I'm I'm enjoying it here, and I think the reason I'm enjoying it here is that they've added additional granularity into the difficulty. So before you would go beginner to rookie to veteran to all-star or whatever, right? But now they've also added in an amateur and a minor in terms of like minor leagues, amateur leagues, in terms of gradation between the beginner and the rookie. So what it does is it ends up giving a longer ramp for somebody getting started. If you're playing on dynamic difficulty where it slowly keeps, incrementing you up depending on how you're playing, it makes it, the onboarding is easier. I find myself as somebody who is not, the truth is, as much as I enjoy baseball and grew up playing baseball, that batting has always been anxiety inducing for me. That it's the one-on-one aspect of knowing just how much you can fail and that everybody else is watching you fail. Where out in the field, I'm glad to play, and I like the anticipation, the unknown, the variety, the randomness of where that ball is going to go. But it's that anxiety of the one-on-one battle. And so I've always struggled finding the right difficulty in MLB the Show. And so having these extra two has allowed me to kind of play around with that, and even over 2 nights to feel a little more confidence in terms of my timing, in terms of reading a pitch, that I wasn't, beginner was really easy and rookie I was struggling. And so this gives me a little bit more here to play around with. So I've enjoyed that difference. I find the fielding feels smoother than last year. Surprising. I mean, it's not drastically different in terms of how you field the ball or control or throw the ball, but the responsiveness off the hit for the fielders, it feels a little like your infield and outfielders run a little more fluidly, and maybe in some ways they feel like they have a little less weight than it did. Like it felt like getting some momentum before was sometimes a challenge. Here it feels like they've sped that up a little bit. And again, maybe that's just because of the difficulty I'm playing with, but it does feel a little different in the infield in terms of the responsiveness of fielding. Other than that, I don't know that it's, reading other reviews online, I don't know that it does a whole lot drastically different. Franchise mode is still pretty much the same as it was. One of the things that it has done is in the March to October, it's added more front office things in terms of trades and pitcher rotations and things like that. It's given you a few more of those, it's fleshed out that March to October mode a little bit is what it sounds like. I just haven't had a chance to play with it enough to see those new features. So let's go from another annual release to what has been almost an annual cycle for the last 8 to 9 years in Destiny 2. So Game Logic, you're still playing some Destiny 2. Have you made your way through the story at this point, or how's your juggling of characters coming?
So I haven't made it all the way through kind of like the first like true proper story. Characters are doing fine. I think one of them just hit. I think one of the performance milestones in the game is for you to hit a point where you can mix your loadout to a point where it equates to a 1500 light level. So I think one of my characters, the Hunter, has hit that.
Yeah, and that opens up a number of your kind of weekly extra your pinnacle gear, your powerful gear, all the things that you're used to kind of toward the end game there.
Right. So I've also had the opportunity to play a little co-op. And so Brap, who was on the show a few weeks ago, joined me for some Destiny 2 Gameplay was pretty neat. Just to run through it. We didn't go through with any intention. I think in my campaign, that character, the Hunter, which is the third one that I kind of injected into the story, has hit the point where he must participate in a strike in order to get through that part of the campaign. So I think where Brap and I kind of played through last night is either in a very similar place or or soon will be. So it was a good time. Like I said, most of the time was spent playing co-op, which just is a slightly different dynamic, but always enjoyable. Particularly even though you don't have a full fire team, but if a third person just kind of shows up and joins in, you always have that effect in Destiny 2 as well.
Is that the strike where you're riding on the kind of the raft boat skiff that kind of takes you through?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's up next for that character. So I don't know that I'm really looking forward to that, but I see a lot of people running that strike who are like incredibly way over leveled. So maybe that's my one saving grace.
Well, if you want an extra person, let me know because I'll be happy to jump in. And yeah, I'm still I haven't had a chance to, because I've been playing 2 new games this week. I haven't really had a chance to do my weeklies, but I think I'm around 15, 18 or so at this point. So yeah, feel free. That'd be great. It's fun. There's one more strike within the campaign, which is also a pretty interesting piece where it kind of loops you through fighting the boss a couple different times. And so yeah, it does a lot there. And I enjoy that strike because of the kind of the diverse landscapes of it all. So, yep. Cool. You got another Paul Tassi story over from Forbes, Destiny writer extraordinaire, Paul Tassi. So what does he have to say here?
So this article from Forbes, Destiny 2 is nerfing its most terrifying PvE enemy, but not until next season. I remember when Forsaken was announced as being the next thing to get vaulted in Destiny 2, I wondered if the Scorn were going to be long for this world, given how much of that campaign is based around them, and how they only appear in the Dreaming City /Tangle Shore / Presage mission and Gambit. Well, it turns out the Scorn are here to stay, given that they have been prominently featured in Destiny 2's Witch Queen expansion, including the first inclusion of the Scorn in an actual raid. So I don't know exactly which PvE boss. Well, it's not a boss. I guess it's an enemy type that you run across frequently. I think he's talking about the Scorn Sniper. And so,
yeah, they can pack a punch. That's for sure.
Yeah. So they're gonna remove that threat for you, so you can run around out in the open a little more unopposed than some Scorn sniping you from the other side of the map. But yeah, that's the plan. I guess that's good. Their own noticing of there being some imbalance. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, with the change of the Scorn and the loss of the Dreaming, or the wherever Spider was, right, the Forgotten Shore, being able to, when you have a Vanguard bounty that requires Scorn, the only real option you have at this point is, well, I guess you could do the very beginning of the Dreaming City strike, which nobody really enjoys, or you could go into the 2 new ones, and that one that you were just talking about, definitely you get some Scorn there throughout. So, all right, well, I am going to talk about just a game that came out of nowhere for me, and I have really enjoyed. It's Imp of the Sun, which is a small indie studio. The studio is Sunwolf Games. They're Peruvian, and this game kind of draws on some Peruvian legend and Inca mythology, similar to how I really enjoyed Tunic last fall, and the kind of Mesoamerican aspects of it. This is a Metroidvania-esque game. It has a real feel of Guacamelee to it, somewhat in the character designs in terms of the the cultural touch points, but also in combat rooms in terms of the making your way through. It is also very much a Metroidvania of I know that I should be able to wall jump to get up to that space, but I can't yet. So I know I'm going to have to come back around in this cycle. But it is after so many Metrovanias have gone the kind of punishing, roguelike route or just the hyper difficulty of things. This is it's refreshing that it's not difficult. And it's enjoyable. It's a Saturday morning cartoon game. It is the character designs are charming, the exploration is interesting, the combat is engaging enough to make me want to keep going. That it does give you as you're starting to play through, you do get some additional moves like a dash. You do get some fire charge moves because you are basically a little flame imp that is making their way through to defeat the corruption in the land. And so as you in true Metrovania fashion, you unlock more both move sets, but also weapons abilities and skill set things to do. So you get some air dashes. You've got the ability to kind of do a large flame. But you also have this ability that allows you to heal. Is that you have flame charges that can heal yourself, and if you're in near a flame or near the sun, that ability recharges. So it's very forgiving in terms of the damage you can take and the ability to heal. And this is all on the normal level. There's a new game plus type of thing with a greater difficulty, but I am finding that it's a $14-15 game. It is out on Switch, Steam, other platform, on both other major consoles. I'm playing it on Switch because it's a nice little handheld. It looks good. It looks really nice in OLED, and it's sit back on a couch, kind of relax and explore rather than kind of white knuckled timing and everything else. So while I'm leaning forward to make sure I can hit my pitches in MLB the Show, I'm taking a chance to kind of relax in Imp of the Sun. It's one of these games that I will probably come back to it throughout the year. It's probably going to be one of those surprises that it might even make its way to the Superlative Show because it is flying under the radar. Like I looked online for reviews, and the only real review I'm finding right now is on Nintendo Life and no place else. So it's a very small game, but it's got it seems like looking at listening to YouTube and some reviews there, it's got 4 to 6 hours of gameplay, so not a lot, but also that is right in my wheelhouse of like, oh, I could actually maybe finish this game without jumping into 6 other games beforehand. So that part has also been very enjoyable. So that's Imp of the Sun by Sunwolf. One more game on our list here. I've been playing some Lost Ark. So is this the Amazon Games Korean game action RPG on PC?
So this is another. I got to figure out a way to. Maybe I just need to separate those sections. So this is this is from the What's Next part of that show segment.
Okay, so this is see anything else? What's next? So yes, we probably should make those separate. So talk to me about why Lost Ark is coming up next in your playlist.
It's just something that I had identified and has kind of been on my when you get time to get around to it list for a while. So given that I'm going to have to do some PC upgrades and kind of shuffle some GPUs around, I teed this game up to play just over at a workstation, when I'm taking breaks from all that. Interested to kind of see how the graphics play out. It looks like a good game, which is not a label that I typically refer to an MMO with. So it's free to play. We'll kind of see where it goes. I don't think I've ever really thrown in and given much over to the fantasy based kind of free to play model, whereas like the sci-fi stuff always interests me. So I haven't decided yet if making that an ask for myself is destined for failure, but we'll give it.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about it in the free to play model is you get a chance to dive in, give it some exploration. I played the beta for it when Amazon Games had their beta for it again a couple months ago. At this point, I found the combat enjoyable. The character classes were interesting. It's pretty flashy. It's pretty polished. I think the challenge that I had was trying to parse out, and this will be interesting to hear your perspective of how it stacks up against other action RPGs and why you're choosing one over the other type of thing when we have others to play with. So you've got that up in your list of what's coming next for you. I need to play some Cyberpunk on Stadia, because that is our Pix Plays assignment for this month with our cloud gaming. That whether it is maybe you took advantage of the $60 loophole for PlayStation Now that will stack into the new PlayStation Premium Plus, whatever high-end tier, or it's, as Tao has talked about, playing some xCloud. So that is our Pix Plays assignment. We're going to get back to that in a couple of weeks here, but next week on our show it will be Game Logic and Tao Master 99. I'll actually be stepping out of the rotation to take care of. I'll be out of the office, so to say, on that day. So I will be interested to hear your experience with Lost Ark, to see what Tao's been up to over the last week. So, and I know that I will come back in 2 weeks rested and full of plenty of games to talk about as well. Game Logic, any other updates before we head out for the evening?
Nope, nothing from my end.
All right. So thank you again, Game Logic. I will be interested to hear how your continued driver updates and swap outs go here as you move from one set to the other. And for myself, DBQ Hams, I am so glad to have the chance to talk with you tonight, tomorrow, whenever you're listening to us. Thank you again. So play the games you love those you play with, and take care. Good night, everybody.